opportunity to provide an overview of our AWS remote worker and student promotion to California education. We're excited about the opportunity to share that, and with me today will be Brian Orlovsky, the Dean of Technology from Mount San Jacinto, where we had the opportunity to recently implement what we're going to show you today. Mike Shea, who's the Vice President of Cloud Services for InterVision, and Jay Owen, who's a Principal Architect with InterVision, who built and implemented the solution for Brian at Mount San Jacinto. So let me get going. What we're going to do in terms of the structure of the presentation today is we're going to go through, already did the introductions, we're going to go through and give you an overview of the program, and then Brian, and an overview of InterVision, and Brian will provide the story around what Mount San Jacinto has been doing and done, a little bit about where they're headed with their digital conversion to the cloud, as well as specifically what we did in this particular use case. And then he'll hand the baton to Jay Owen, the Principal Architect, and Jay will segue from the PowerPoint presentation into a live overview of the environment and how he set it up. And then Mike Shea, who is, as I mentioned, is the Vice President of Cloud Services, he will talk to you about the assumptions for completing this kind of project in a short amount of time. We've estimated that in general, if we have the same kind of variables, we can get this work done in about 50 hours. So Mike will go through that and what an engagement and workflow would look like. And then next steps, if you're so interested to get more information about this. So with that, I'm just going to give you a little quick overview of InterVision. So for those of you who are on the call, if you're not aware of who we are, we're a mid-sized organization, just under 400 people. We're in 12 locations. We have a large number of technical people. So about 3/4 of our employees are what you would call technical resources, whether they're certified, engineers, cloud architects, those kinds of individuals. That's kind of what we're comprised of. So we're focused on largely public sector, and then we have a good-sized commercial practice as well. And within the cloud, we are, my cursor is frozen. There we go. Within the cloud, we pretty much do it all. We've got, with AWS, we've got migration competencies and government competencies and education competencies, storage and DR competencies, and we've done a broad range of things across a large number of services. And with that, we've brought that expertise into education in California specifically in a lot of different ways. We have a big relationship with the California Community College system, who a lot of the folks who might be attending today would come from there with the tech center, the work we do there for the last 4 years, and that work we continue to do is provide them with a lot of different services and expertise. And we work across a number of individual colleges as well in the system. And then we work with the CSU and some of the CSU universities as well. So we have a very intensive focus on education, specifically in higher ed in California. And so with that, I'm going to give you a little introduction here to Brian Orlovsky. He was kind enough to give us a great reference. And for those of you who received the promotional materials for the no-cost implementation of Appstream, you'll see at the back end of it, we highlighted the success story or the case study in which in this case, Jay Owen came in, one of our architects, and helped Brian and the team at Mount San Jacinto get their application stood up using Appstream and made available as COVID-19 hit, and made that very difficult for them. So Brian, thanks a lot for your support. I'm going to hand it off to you.
Great, thanks, Scott. Hello, y'all. My name is Brian Orlovsky, Dean of IT, but you know that. And I see some familiar names on the call, so that's great. Mount San Jacinto College, MSJC, is a community college in Riverside County, California. Just to give you some context about who we are, we cover about 1,700 square miles. We have 4 primary locations. We serve about 30,000 unduplicated students a year. FTS, for those of you that care, is right about 11,800, and we serve a little more than 500 full-time employees. And then we have about another 600 to 700 associate faculty. So just kind of backing up a little bit, Mount San Jacinto College has had a relationship with InterVision since September. about a year ago, our executive leadership, so we took in meeting with executive leadership, we took a approach to the cloud where we're going to look cloud first, native first. And the reason for this was we just purchased a $56 million complex, new campus in Temecula, California. It's a medical grade building built in 2008. We purchased it from Abbott Labs, had a great data center, and that was something that we had never had at Mount San Jacinto College. However, that space was cannibalized by student services, financial aid specifically. And in that conversation, as we purchased that building and now we're renovating, we decided that we would look to other solutions for our infrastructure, specifically Azure or AWS. We went through an RFP process, really RFI, RFP, and we selected InterVision as our partner to help us take us to AWS. So we've gone through, we've had a strong relationship. We're currently, we're working on taking our colleague student information center to AWS. We've done a lot of the groundwork with InterVision over the past 6 to 8 months. And so when this COVID-19 thing happened, obviously we reached out to InterVision and we were talking about solutions that we could take going forward. Fast forward to, I think it was the 20th of March, and Ventura Community College did a webinar on Appstream. It was in the morning. I think it was like at 9 or something. And I know they were partnering with AWS on that, on the presentation. And we caught a glimpse of that presentation. And out of that presentation, we reached out to Jay Owen, who's our principal solutions architect. And we had Jay on the phone in 10 minutes. And we had a meeting, I think, scheduled with him, I think at 11 a.m. To talk Appstream and see if it would be a solution for us. From our perspective, what we needed to do, Riverside County was one of the first counties in this COVID outbreak to actually shut down all the schools in the county. And so what we had to do very quickly was stand up a remote workforce. I'm sure a lot of you are in the same boat. And what we saw was we really had 5 primary applications that we needed to provide to our administrative staff to continue working for our students. One of those was our colleague UI application, user interface application that is used by the staff. Another one was our on-base document imaging application. A third was our SARS Anywhere application, and that's used for scheduling of appointments online and managing those appointments with our allowing our counseling staff and administrative staff to manage those student appointments. Our SQL Server reporting services, and Galaxy, which is a homegrown county financial system for Riverside County Office of Education. So in talking with Jay, we kind of went through the use cases and we decided that, yeah, we thought it could be done. We did. Luckily, we had talked to Ventura a little bit and understood how the application had worked. But really, when we came back to Jay, I should say that we had that relationship with InterVision already. And one of the benefits that we had was we had a VPN pipe from AWS to our district, and we had already some Active Directory servers provisioned there. But to be candid, and this sounds remarkable, we started working on it with Jay immediately in that meeting. And by Saturday evening, we had a production Appstream fleet ready to go for Monday, where we started training our staff. And when I say training our staff, we trained right about 300 staff members over a 2-day period, Monday and Tuesday, to use Appstream. And so what we started at about 11 a.m. on Friday, we were able to stand up AppStream with 4 of those applications. To be clear and transparent, the Galaxy application isn't working properly because of a networking issue with the Riverside County Office of Education, and we're still trying to work through that. But the other 4 have been production since that Saturday night, and so I just wanted to give a shout out to Jay. Thank you for working through the weekend. It was very much a relief to know when I came in Monday, we at least had resources for our staff to utilize. And a big shout out to Heather and Marshall and Ben over at AWS. They've been absolutely wonderful to deal with, and they've helped get us resources to vet our solution. And so I just can't give them enough thanks either. But anyways, that's really all I have. I just wanted to kind of tell you what we did with Appstream in a very short amount of time. We've been using it since. Our users, yeah, it's been working. We're currently supporting about 40 concurrent users on it. Our instance is scalable up to about 200 to 300 at this point. But we're just getting our workforce back into the swing of things. So anyways, that's kind of where we're at Mount San Jacinto College. So I will toss it over to Jay.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Jay, I'm going to put the architecture. Are you up there, Jay, now? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you guys hear me?
Okay, cool. We can hear you fine.
Great.
So you should see the Appstream architecture you developed for Mount San Jacinto now, correct?
Yep, I see it. So do you want to transfer control to me? I can show the...
Sure. I stopped sharing and you should be able to take control now.
All right. Unfortunately, the share content button is grayed out for me.
Chris Cruz, can you?
I just passed.
I got it. Never mind.
Also, in the break here, if anybody has any questions during any of this, you can use the Q&A functionality or the chat functionality, and I'll be sure to let the team know.
All right. So my Firefox web browser should be visible with MSJC logo on it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. So this, just start from here. This is the screen that users who log into Appstream come to at MSJC. You can customize Appstream so that you have a portal that looks like it's part of your own infrastructure, and you can add your own other links that you might want to put on here, your privacy policy or whatnot. And that just has a little advertisement for AWS at the bottom, of course, but it's your own branded page that you get. But we'll back up just a minute and come back to this, and I'll show you the architecture diagram first. So MSJC already had a AWS environment, so theirs looks just a little bit different from this, but this architecture diagram here is a representation of what we would build out in the offer that we're presenting here. It's set up such that if a campus who takes this offer and uses it does not have AWS infrastructure already set up, the way we're setting it up here will enable them to expand on this later and grow their infrastructure. So in order to do that, we are building the whole account structure around the AWS Transit Gateway, and also, which is not shown here, AWS organizations. So with both those together, you can scale out, add extra AWS accounts as needed, and then the Transit Gateway is basically a router in the cloud and allows you to connect all the VPCs and your different AWS accounts together. And then it also provides a single point of backhaul back to your campus, either through a VPN or direct connect. And you can see in here, I've got a diagram showing existing application servers, which are on the local network at the campus, can be accessed through the Transit Gateway by any of the AWS infrastructure. But the Appstream infrastructure is here in this account on the left. And so basically what we have is a VPC with two private subnets in it. that has the Appstream components. So when a user logs in, and we'll show what that looks like in a minute in the console, but the user is assigned an instance that belongs to them during their session, and it is actually launched into a subnet inside the VPC that's specified during the Appstream build out. It's basically an EC2 instance, but it's a managed instance behind the scenes. There's not any control over it like you would have with a normal EC2 instance. There's an auto scaling fleet associated with it, which we'll talk about in a minute too. And depending on what your needs are, the applications they're using, if they need access direct to the internet, that can be provided through a NAT gateway, which will route traffic out direct to the internet, or you can have it all routed back through the transit gateway back to your campus. So whatever egress firewall you might have in place can control your egress internet access the same. And then as far as the Appstream users go, they're of course all remote, and they could be on your campus or remote, but they're provided either an endpoint within AWS to access directly, and that would be chosen if you didn't want to manage user accounts yourself. Appstream has a concept of user pools, which is basically a identity provider just for Appstream, where you can assign users based on email addresses, and they'll be assigned a password, and then they can go to the Appstream portal to log in. Or you can use an existing identity provider that you might have, like Azure AD or on-premise Active Directory or whatever. PortalGuard can be used, or any other SAML-based authentication mechanism. And if your users are defined in that external identity provider, Appstream can use those to log your users into the application. Any questions on that before I move over to the AWS console? So over in the console, I showed you the login portal, and we'll just briefly look at what this looks like. When a user clicks on an application, there is an initial startup time, which is less than 2 minutes. And the reason this happens is because, which I'll show you in a second, there's two different concepts for how to use Appstream. There's an always on mode, and then there's an on-demand mode. The on-demand mode is definitely cheaper and is probably what most people would want to use, but there is a short startup cost associated with that. While this is loading, we'll jump over to the console.
Came into, and sorry if I'm butchering these because I'm having to interpret them from the chat, but it looks like there was one around two-factor authentication, assuming in that portal.
Yeah, so if you're using your own identity provider, whatever method of two-factor authentication you have in place would still work. For instance, like if you're using myapps.microsoft.com and Azure AD, if you have that set up for two-factor and then you use that to authenticate into Appstream, the two-factor would still apply. Or if you're using Okta or PortalGuard or anything like that, the Appstream portal itself, if you use the identity provider there's not a two-factor method set up there right now, but I suspect they're probably working on that. We could check with AWS if there's any more questions on when that might be available.
Great. And then another one came in that says, what about connecting apps to hosted solutions in AWS that we don't manage directly?
So if it has an endpoint that's accessible via HTTP or HTTPS, then yeah, you could definitely do it. I'll show you what that looks like. Actually, right here, this is finished loading. So the application that I clicked on was, I believe it was the SSRS application, which is a web-based application. So the application is hosted on the MSJC campus, and the see if it'll load here. The Appstream, what it's doing is it's actually encapsulating a web browser. So you can see we're actually in a web browser here, and it's going to this URL. So this could be actually any URL that you want to put in. And within Appstream, you have the different applications, so you could put whatever that application was, give it its own icon, and the user could select it and get to it that way. So yeah, that's definitely something you can do. And you can, if you want, launch the web browser in kiosk mode where the navigation bar doesn't show up if that's something that you want to do. But so once the application is launched, the user has access to it just as if they were on campus accessing it. And the advantage to this, of course, as opposed to setting up a VPN where the user would have to install VPN software on their computer and connect to the campus intranet, you don't have to worry about the tech support burden associated with setting up all those VPN connections. And then also you don't have to worry about if this application happens to be one where the user has to download and manipulate PII, you don't have to worry about that being on their local computer at home, which is out of your control. So this encapsulates the browser and they can work with it as they would normally. There's no desktop access, but there are ways to access storage, which I'll show here in a second. So in the console, Appstream is broken down into several different concepts. The top level is a stack, and the stack basically encapsulates all the applications that you deploy together. And what I mean by that is there's an image that you build that contains all your applications. We'll take a deeper look at that in a minute. But the image is run by a fleet of servers, and then the fleet is encapsulated by a stack. So the stack being the top level, basically is just the wrap around all of it, and it's where you name the fleet, and then you can configure extra storage for your users, which I mentioned earlier. It's possible to link up OneDrive or Google Drive to it, or just use S3. And you can control some other things, such as the user's ability to copy and paste files and things like that. And you can choose to have persistence on their session. So each of their sessions will have settings saved that are reapplied on the next one. Other than that, there's branding settings, which I was showing on the screen earlier. You can put your college's branding here, and then you can enter in any of the other particular website links that you might want to add there. Moving down from stacks, so the stack encapsulates the fleet, and the fleet is the basically auto-scaling group that contains all of your instances. So as I mentioned earlier, there's two different types of Appstream fleets. You've got on-demand, which is what this one is, and there's also an always-on. And each user who logs in has to have one server available. So it's one server per user. That means you have to have enough servers in place or active for the users that you expect to log in. And there's some metrics you can look at to see how many servers are active and how many are available. I'll come back to this in a second, but the scaling policies are where you control how many servers are actually available. So the on-demand version, it has the way it works is you've got three different states a server can be in. It can be stopped, or it can be provisioned but not in use, and then it can be actually in use. So when it's stopped, you don't pay anything for that server. When it's provisioned but not in use, you pay a minimal charge of 2.5 cents per hour. And then when it's actually in use, you pay the full charge for whatever that particular server size is. And it ranges from 10 cents per hour up to quite expensive, but the higher end ones are reserved for specific use cases like graphics or CAD drawings or things like that. Most cases, the smaller instances will be fine for applications that the colleges would typically have. MSJC is using the 10 cent per hour one, and it's been working fine as far as I know. So on the scaling policies, these are really dependent on your expected use case, and it's something you kind of have to play with. But as I said, you need a machine available when a user when you think a user is going to use it. So you kind of have to stay ahead of the curve on how many machines you have active. So there's a base capacity that you provision, and this would be the number of instances that are available all the time. So we have 40 set here, and then the max it could ever scale out to would be 200. Now, this can be overridden by the scale out policies below. So can go with a scheduled scaling policy, as you see here, such that during the normal business hours, during the work week, you might want to set a different minimum level. And then outside of that, you might want to set a lower one. So if you knew that you're gonna have 100 users all log in right at 8 a.m. on Monday, then you probably want to set, the minimum to 100. And if you knew, well, others might slowly trickle in during the day, over the next 2 hours, you might want to add another policy on top of that, such as this one here, which it checks the capacity of the actual instance fleet. And if there are more than 65% of the provision instances in use, then you start adding more and more. And that keeps you kind of ahead of the curve on use. And this, again, is something that you just have to tune. It's best to start with a more aggressive scaling policy. So you might want to, at first, if you know you have 50 users, just set it to 50. And then you can monitor the usage patterns that you're having and tweak the scaling policies to get the best bang for your buck on your AWS spend. And so there's the actual capacity, which is the total number of instances. You got the in use, which are machines that are provisioned but no users, or I'm sorry, those are provisioned with a user logged in, and the difference between the two would be the excess, which you have available. You can also set up some notifications on here to notify you when some scaling activities take place. So moving on from there, so in order to have a fleet, you've got to have an image. And so AWS provides several different choices of base images to use. And whenever you decide you're ready to install applications in AppStream, first thing you have to do is decide what image you want to start with. And to do that, you come into the image builder, and all of them are Windows based. So you've got 2019, 2016, goes back to 2012. And there's quite a different number. There's some that are designed to work with graphics workloads. But generally one of the 2016 base or 2019 base is going to work. So once you pick one of those, go back over to, and actually it won't let me do that. So once you pick a image that you want to go with, and you've got a image builder running, then you can actually log into it. And let me start this up. Forgot to do that earlier. Takes a few minutes to start up. But once you launch it, basically what happens is you log in just like you're logging into a Windows server, and then you install the applications that you want to use on that server. And then you take basically a snapshot of it. There's actually a setup program you run first that lets AppStream know that which applications you want to expose into the portal, which those are the ones that we were looking at here earlier. And then you create an image from that. And then once the image is created, when you build your fleet, you specify the image here, and then that'll be the image that all the users have access to. So if at any point in the future you decide you want to add more applications or change something, then you can always come in and actually edit the image that the fleet is using. And so the same image will be shared with all the users in the fleet. So if you had a situation where you had a small group of users that had a completely different use case from the rest of them, such as maybe like a engineering team that was working with CAD software or something like that, then you might want to have two fleets. Another case that might come up is if you had really distinct use patterns. You had a few users that would log in at a certain time of day, had different set applications, then they didn't use them anymore, and it might make sense to have another fleet for those. And I was going to log in here and show what it looked like, but I got to check to see if the image builder was running. So we can come back to this in a minute, but in the meantime, why don't we take any questions there are?
Hey Jay, can you just comment on the secure connection requirements? I think you said you don't require VPN, right?
So to connect to Appstream itself, right? You don't need a VPN to connect to Appstream itself. It's a public endpoint, and that's the whole choice of Appstream or VPN is, you know, if you want to use a VPN, then you have to set up VPNs on all your users' computers, and they could be computers that are out of your control. You don't know what else is installed in them. You don't know if it's patched or anything like that. And then of course you have the concern about PII escaping your control. So Appstream is a way to avoid having to have all your users set up VPNs, and it encapsulates the applications as well. If you're talking about the VPN here, it connects. So this is a site-to-site VPN that connects from AWS back to the campus itself. And this is a particular VPN that AWS offers, a managed VPN. It has 2 tunnels for redundancy. It's not using both at the same time, but it has 2 in case one fails. And also they may take one down at any time for maintenance, in which case it would just fail over to the other. But this is the path that is necessary in order for Appstream to be able to communicate back to on-premise to access any applications which you want to expose via a web URL inside Appstream. So this connection here is traversing the transit gateway back. And I didn't talk about DNS resolution, but in the MSJC case, we actually have domain controllers on EC2 that are doing this. But AWS has a managed directory platform that would be used to provide DNS lookups that are on premise. So Appstream, when it makes the DNS lookup, this VPC is set to use these particular instances here as their DNS servers, and they have forwarders on them to know that the domains that are part of the campus infrastructure should go back to campus, and the ones that are not should stay in AWS or go out to the internet.
Thanks, Jay. Because I remember Brian mentioning that it was important. The efficiency of the security connection in Appstream was a big attraction for it as a solution, right, Brian?
Correct. In MSJC, as we're operating right now, a lot of individuals are working off their home devices. And I certainly wasn't comfortable with giving them VPN access to our internal network without knowing that those devices were sanitized. So this abstracts their devices from our network.
We had another question come through. The question is, all fleets run under the same stack?
No, you create a different stack for every fleet you created.
Great, thank you. It looks like another one just came in. So a few questions. Is your use case primarily staff? And then it goes on to say, any provision stacks available to students? Can you highlight the OneDrive, Google Drive integration for storage?
I think the first question is for Brian.
Yeah, so our initial use case was for staff, and we're just starting to talk about use cases for students, specifically some of the computer labs and things like that. We're not there yet, but I definitely see it as a potential solution for the students. And
there's nothing technically that would prevent us from supporting that, right, Brian? It's more of a decision.
Correct. And just to touch on the OneDrive, Google Drive, we are an Office 365 institution. Our email, we use SharePoint, OneDrive. And so while we haven't configured that OneDrive integration at this point, we're definitely going to.
It just gives you control here to allow or not allow. So if you do allow it, then you check the box, and you've got to give them the domain name that you're using and So it restricts it so they can't just link any OneDrive. It's for your domain up, and then they can access it through their instance. But we didn't do that like Brian said on the MSJC case, not yet anyway. But I could see a lot of people. Go ahead.
So in the Appstream instance, from the user perspective, we didn't launch the browsers in kiosk mode, and one of the reasons why was OnBase is our document imaging system, and we have people that will transfer from their OneDrive to OnBase, and we wanted that all encapsulated within Appstream itself. So we did give them access in the browser to access Office 365 for the stated purpose of moving documents between the applications in Appstream and Office 365. So just wanted to highlight that use case.
Yeah, and there's so with routing rules in each AWS subnet, you can make sure that if you do want to give the user access to the URL bar and let them go anywhere essentially, so that it'd be basically just like if they're sitting at their office PC, then the routes can be set up such that anytime they do that, it's going to go back through here. So you'll still have control over the egress traffic and filtering and all that kind of stuff. It can be set up to go straight out through internet gateway too, if you want to do that, but you have options there. So the image builder here is launched. First time you log in, you'll get this little prompt here, and you just select administrator to install your apps on the image builder. And basically, when you come in, it just looks like a remote desktop session. Nothing any different than a normal, Windows Server install. You just install whatever applications that you want to install on it. So for the applications that are exposing web browsers, you of course want to install, Chrome or Firefox, or if you're using Edge or Internet Explorer or whatever, you would install it. And then once you're done with installation, they have this image assistant right here that you open. And this is the tool that basically lets Appstream know which applications it should expose. And you just click on it, the plus here to add an app, pick out the executable and say open. And once you've done that, you'll get to a point here where you have to configure the name of it, and you do that, and you'll give it, if you have a particular icon you want to use, you can plug it in right there. And here's where the actual navigation to the website is set up. It's a command line parameter. If you wanted to run this in kiosk mode, you could do that too. There's a command line parameter to do that. Once you do that, then there's a couple more steps you go through here. And basically what's happening is you configure you allow Appstream to optimize the application so that it can figure out what resolution it needs and the best way to deliver to the client, things like that. It's all stuff that AWS is handling behind the scenes. You're just basically clicking through the steps, and then you're verifying that it looks right at the end. And once you do that, then you're complete with this, and you go back into Appstream, and then you take your image that you've built, and then you can convert it over to a registered image that you can then run in your fleet. And that's pretty much all there is to the setup. It's pretty quick, like Brian said. We were through it pretty fast. When you do work with applications that are web-based, there's not really too much to worry about because you're installing an application that is commonly installed on a server, and there's not any special requirements to it. So these are pretty easy to work with. If you have an application that is like a thick client application that is communicating with a server back on premise, or maybe a standalone, there could be a little more time involved, and depending on the age of the application or whatever other complexities it had, it could be significantly more time. So just want to make that clear. It's pretty straightforward though, the whole setup process.
A couple questions came in, if it's a good time to address them.
Sure.
One is if Appstream is a one user to one server solution, what is the difference between Appstream and remote desktop scenarios?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, when you come down to it, technically, the resources that are consumed, there's not a difference. It's still allocating a EC2 instance in the background. The difference is the user doesn't get access to this desktop. They only see the application that you're allowing them to see. So they're basically using their browser, and then they'll see the application inside the browser window. They're not going to see this desktop. So you're controlling the environment in that way by giving them specifically what you want them to access. And then also with Appstream, like I was saying, with the on-demand pricing, when the user logs out, your price drops either to 2.5 cents per hour or 0. So it'll drop down to 2.5 cents until the auto scaling policy decides that the instance they were using is no longer needed.
Great, thank you. One more.
Hey, real quick,
Go ahead.
if I could just chime in. I don't know about other institutions, but our remote desktop servers, historically, as we've had them, have just gotten hammered with from the outside trying to exploit them to the tune of, in some cases, a couple 100,000 attempts, in a day. So this kind of this allows us to to protect ourselves, I think, a little bit better and not exposing those remote desktop resources. As
Yeah,
well as
you're passing on the burden of handling the DDoS attacks and hackers to Amazon, basically.
right. And just like Jay said, it also allows us to limit what resources we want to provide to whom.
Awesome. Another one that came in says, for the Windows Server images that were shown, were those developed by MSJC? I saw a colleague and some other standard community college apps baked into that image.
So the image doesn't have those applications baked into it. It's just the web browser that points to them. The applications actually still are on servers on premise. So this is a quick way to get remote access to applications that are local to the LAN only. And going through AWS is basically eliminating the need for a VPN. So we didn't actually install the applications on the servers. You could do that if there's a thick client or whatnot that you want to install. Since they were already there on premise, the web browser was a much faster way to do it.
Thanks, Jay. Hey, Jay, would you mind relinquishing the share button or giving it back to making it accessible to me, and let Mike bring it home? And Chris, can you make sure I can share again as well? Thank you.
Yep, I'm passing it over to you now. You should have the rights in just a moment.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you. Perfect. I'm gonna let Mike Shea bring it home, and we'll talk to you. Make sure we give you the details of what the offer is. Hopefully, this has been helpful for Jay to walk you through, and Brian to walk you through kind of what we did, how we did it, what's involved, and give you some confidence that this might be a good help for you. So, Mike, take it away.
Sure. Next slide, please. Yeah. So, this offering is about jump-starting your work, but also completing the setup of 3 clients and providing you kind of end-to-end support for setting that up. And what you see here is just a little kind of idea of the allocation of the time that we put associated with this and the steps. So we'd work with you, meetings. We've got a questionnaire as well that we would work with, and this is all kind of engineered to try to move you through in a kind of expedited fashion, in a lightweight fashion to get you enabled with, as it mentions here, 3 web-based thin clients. But so some of the notes here, just so you all kind of can understand the some of the assumptions around the hours. Standard architecture, so the architecture we just kind of laid out, where client responsible for the VPN aspects of it, and the architecture that we'd use is the standard Appstream architecture, which we set up in a separate just per that diagram. From an identity perspective, we have a couple options there for, as Jay had mentioned, connecting with a identity provider that y'all want to provide, or we can set up connectivity via Appstream, which would require us to load users, etc., and doesn't currently have the two-factor authentication. So in the case of MSJC, we're using PortalGuard for that. As I mentioned, the network connectivity, just the client-side VPN you'd be responsible for, but we can help set that up as well. But any kind of significant, custom networking might require some additional time. And then we mentioned the 3 web-based applications. That should say thick client there, but it's if we do a desktop app, obviously a newer application and thin client would likely not be an issue. But there is extra considerations in that case. So as Jay mentioned, when you get on the Appstream EC2, it's usually a pretty, the one we're using for MSJC, we look at a very small box there that runs where we're running just a browser. In the case of a thick client, we'd have to look at, the system requirements for the installation of that thick client and just make sure that's, compatible on the server version of Windows. And so there's a couple extra steps there, but we believe we can do a thick client, but it may require some additional time. And again, this is, we can continue work with you all in enablement, but we're just trying to give you an idea of, the Jumpstart offering, what we can do in this timeline.
And the reason it's important is because the 50 hours is what we've offered as the no-cost part of this promo. So what we would do for all of the colleges who are eligible under CMAS is we credit you 50 hours against the engagement. And so what Mike was doing, trying to give you a sense of how that 50 hours would likely get used, that is in fact roughly what it took for Mount San Jacinto. And so if it goes above 50 hours, then we would invoke the rates on the CMAS agreement with you. Otherwise, it would be fully covered.
Thanks, Scott. So the next slide. So this is just the implementation tasks. Obviously, Jay is kind of walking through that kind of behind the scenes, is very illuminating on what we do. But overall, these are the steps: discovery meeting. Then we look at the accounts, set up SSO, the networking components. Obviously, that's running in parallel, especially on the VPN side. We need to get that started immediately. We use the AD to resolve DNS for the links that we'll hit. So setting up an AD trust to your internal AD, setting up the image, testing the image, the set up the fleet and the scaling policies as we saw there on the Appstream stack with that configuration, existing identity management solution connection. This is where we can use something that you already have currently, where with two-factor or otherwise, and then guide and testing. So those are the basic tasks. Scott, do you want to talk to this one? This is what you just mentioned.
I guess it would help if I take myself off mute. One of the requirements we have is if you're an existing client, you already set up with us, we'll just get the engagement agreed to leverage the CMS. If you're a non-InterVision but have an existing AWS account, we have a transition process of the account, so we become the partner of record to handle to engage in this project for you. And then if you don't use AWS at all and you're not a partner with us, again, we can work with you as well, and we can go through that option.
Yeah, I think it's probably worth noting as well that if you've already done some work with Appstream and you're looking to enable that for another user group, we're happy to help in that situation as well. So this is a basic workflow where we are going to provide information around contacting us, and then we follow up with a scoping questionnaire to try to help kind of organize what we would be doing and to work with, and what we'd be working with y'all to enable. And then internally we would be organized so that we can set up kind of the PO and the agreement and the transfer of the account if that's necessary. But in general, if you look at the kind of the bottom two swim lanes, that's my team, the architect team, and working with the PMs. And we would review your questionnaire, set up a kickoff meeting, review that questionnaire, go through that with y'all, get the network work kicked off. And then we would go and work and implement and configure. And then we'd facilitate validation and connect AD, implement Appstream and test, and close out and then close it out. So these next steps, we've kind of updated this a little bit, but InterVision, we had mentioned, we kind of went into an extra level of technical detail here. And so we're hoping that this Q&A, and if there are any more questions, obviously we want to answer those. But hopefully this is a good kind of set of information for y'all to see the tasks and assumptions. On the questionnaire side of it, if there's interest in moving forward with this, we can get you a questionnaire, and we will set up a meeting to review the questionnaire with all the interested colleges. So we'll be able to kind of facilitate the completion of that questionnaire and try to understand and clarify your answers to that as well. The contact here is mentioned is Deborah Hatfield, and just drop her a line to express your interest and secure a location in our delivery queue.
And just Mike, just to close, and we got about 5 minutes left if there are any remaining questions. But if you haven't received the collateral information that actually outlines the program, we did send that out to all the community colleges, I think most of the CSUs. And so if you have that, you'll see Deborah's contact information on the back if you need it after the fact. I want to thank everybody for their time, for coming in. Thank Brian and the whole MSJC team for their support, an opportunity to share their story and to work with you. And I think, Chris, we've probably got a few minutes for questions. Otherwise, if we don't, we can wrap.
Yep, I'm just taking a look at the chat. Addressed everything that was brought up during the session. I think we're good.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody, again, for your time. I hope you have a great rest of day and evening. And please feel free to reach out to us. We have right now our approach is we're going to support everybody we can who comes our way. We know we can support several dozen. At some point, if you come in late, we reserve the right to, if we get too busy, we may not be able to support this. So the program runs until implementations are scheduled to be completed by the end of June. So we're happy to share more details if you're interested. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you.